Welcome back, everyone. And having boasted to you earlier about how adept I was at snaffling up the pastries, I missed out completely on lunch, so that just serves me right. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're all fired up and ready to go for our last sessions. One of our panellists has gone to the BT Tower by mistake, and I would have loved to have just streamed him in, but I think this is a bit tricky. Anyway, so he may pitch up in the middle of our discussion, but you've all been marvellous and come back very promptly, so I don't want to hold up things now. So I'd like to, without any more ado, just invite our panel to come up on stage. We're going to be looking, as you know, at how digital can help solve one of the biggest issues of our time, which is poverty, something which you would imagine is going to get better, but just seems to get worse and worse. So to discuss this, we have Sian Williams from Toynbee Hall, Chris Goulden, who's Deputy Director of Policy and Research from the Rowntree Foundation, David Mortimer, when he makes it across from the BT Tower, Roger Hamilton from St Mungo's, and Shahanara Begum from Bromley By Bow. So we'll leave him a space at the end, and look at that, marvellous, exactly the right number of chairs. So the way we're going to run this is 5 minutes each just to talk through. Awesome, fantastic, that's amazing. Good timing or what, you know? Anyway, 5 minutes each on just to sort of set out your stall, you know, what you're doing and what you feel would really make a difference in this space. And we'll start at this end, just in case you need to get your breath back.
Okay, thank you. I'm Sian Williams. I work at an organisation called Toynbee Hall, which is in the East End of London and has been trying to tackle poverty since 1884. And so digital in our history, I might be doing things.
No, that's me.
Oh, is it? Okay. It's quite new, I guess. We're about empowerment as well as advocacy, and I think a lot about systems and where systems contribute to the problem in terms of causing the problem, but also how you can adapt systems or improve systems to create solutions. So for me, digital is a really interesting way of thinking. And sometimes I'm thinking about, do we want to replace an existing system with digital? Do we want to augment an existing system with digital? Or do we want to use digital to learn something, to improve systems, services, etc.? So I particularly think about financial health, which of course links into poverty, but poverty is not just about financial health and well-being, but that's what I'm going to focus most of my comments on. So when I think about the first part of the question we were asked to consider, what's the link between digital exclusion and poverty? I think of that in three particular ways. So I think about if you're digitally excluded, that you have fewer connections. So you have fewer connections to people providing products and services and information. You have, therefore, fewer opportunities to increase your knowledge about what you could do, what you could access, how much you could pay or not pay, what you can do to get redress, all of those kinds of issues. And interestingly, if you're not digitally included, then there's probably less information about you on the system. So there's less data about you. You've got a smaller footprint or no footprint at all. And in particular, when you're thinking about accessing, for example, financial products and services, and that might be because you want to pay your utility bill by direct debit, but you haven't got a footprint that tells the provider, the utility provider, that you're safe and secure, you're going to pay, then they won't give you direct debit, and then instead they'll make you have a prepayment meter. So the very fact that you haven't got a credit footprint and that people haven't got information about you, that you haven't built up a data set, means that you might then be offered a more expensive way to pay for utilities. So I think of reduced connection, reduced knowledge, and also reduced knowledge about you, and all of that means to reduced access. And it's reduced access to the way to pay, it's reduced access to affordable credit, it's reduced access to the best prices and deals. All of that, of course, costs you more money, and that's, in my view, the kind of quickest and easiest way to explain how I think that digital exclusion contributes to a key aspect of poverty. So what do we think at Toynbee Hall about ways to tackle that? Well, firstly, I think digital, we forget that digital means data in some way as well. So the minute that you start to use digital, there's some data passing between you and the provider of a service. So I'm really interested in not just that digital can be used to provide services, but that digital can help us as a country, as a government, as a fuel provider, as a debt advice agency, as a financial inclusion thinker, to really understand patterns and where there's a need for systemic change. So, for example, when we're thinking about this direct debit issue, often we'll hear people say, well, only if we could teach people how to use direct debits better, then they'd all use direct debits and we could get rid of the problem with the prepayment meter. But actually, we can see from the data that that's just not the case, and it's by using the data, not just the emotional argument, that we've been able to get the payments industry to agree that within the next 2 years they're going to create a new product, which we're launching in our payment strategy next week, around helping people have more flexible ways to pay. So there's something about really using data and information and research and the footprint that many, many people's stories produce to change the system. So I think that's really crucial. Another aspect is around recognizing that when you ask someone to move from a non-digital to a digital method, it may take people some time. And so we're thinking a lot about when is digital appropriate. And I've just come from another really interesting conference, the Money Advice Liaison Group, and just listened to a panel speak about when to use digital in debt advice. And a really, really interesting statement was digital's not the goal. More people getting access to good debt advice that helps them solve their problems is the goal. So don't start from digital. Ask what's getting in people's way, and can digital be part of the solution? So we're definitely thinking like that and asking ourselves those questions. We've built a tool called the MAP tool, which is a way of assessing someone's financial health, identifying gaps, looking for solutions, understanding what extra support they need, and that can also be used by an organisation to track change over time. So if they're working with that person, they can actually map the impact of their own intervention. That's scary. You know, asking people to go online and use this assessment tool, either as an advisor who doesn't do that normally, or as a user, as an end beneficiary who doesn't do that. So we're taking it slowly. We're not expecting people just to adopt new tools overnight. We recognise that actually any digital transformation takes time and that you've got early adopters. So we're talking to early adopters and saying, what have we done wrong? How do we do that better? And so for me, I think that's one of the key ways that we're really thinking about when we, the sector, whatever that means to you, approach digital. I started with, I've got to get this right first time. Absolutely no. What you need to do is make sure that you limit the damage. So trial, practice, experiment, test things out, but do it in a way that the person on the receiving end of the service is most protected. Make sure that your experiment doesn't cause harm, but don't be frightened to experiment. It's the only way that we're going to learn. And I think finally, it's not just about accessing better prices or accessing better information. It's also about increasing people's opportunities and broadening their horizons. So for example, we run a really, really successful Money Mentors program, helping people in the community learn about money management, learn about financial services, learn about access to the Ombudsman, etc. But it's all a face-to-face program. And actually, when we look across the country, we can see many, many people who can't access that. They can't access it for 12 weeks in a row. So we're building a digital version of exactly the same program. And we're not suggesting that most people would want to do 100% digital. What we're saying to tutors is, you decide. You look at your client group and you decide how much you want to do face-to-face in the classroom and how much you want to do digital. And then you build a blended program and we'll support you to think about how does that work. And a really exciting kind of onward development from that is a piece of work we're hoping to launch together with the Toynbee Foundation, which is around testing one specific thing, which is What helps people move from just getting information online to actually doing something online, transacting, buying a service, switching a utility provider, or buying a fridge online where they can get the best prices? What is it that we can do as a sector that can make that leap from just looking around to actually doing something online? Because it's such a scary thing. So we don't know the answers. We do know that digital is part of the solution. Partnership is definitely key. Learning is definitely key. Being ready to fail, but fail small, and particularly in this environment, limit the impact of your failure on the vulnerable or the consumer or the person you're trying to support. And share as much as possible. And I guess my very last kind of thinking about digital and poverty is that there is a generational gap, but we mustn't fall back on that as an excuse why some people are not benefiting from digital. Because my answer has always been in this work, if people aren't using our services, it's because we haven't designed them well enough. We haven't designed the right thing. So if a particular client group won't move to digital, it's because we haven't got it right yet, not because they never will.
Thank you very much. Chris.
Thank you. Just to say, Maggie, I have to be off at 2:30 to get a train to pick the kids up from York. Just in case overruns, I'm not kind of storming off the stage.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just so you know. Thanks for inviting me here.
By the way, can I just say, that means he will not be eligible for the iPad. Because at the end of the day, we will pull out at random somebody's name, and if they're not here, they won't get the iPad. So that's fine.
Well, the kids aren't that important.
Just so you understand. Well, if you want to prioritise the children, that's your call. Okay, on we go.
Thank you. So I'll try and keep it brief because I think there's a risk of us saying the same kind of thing and preaching to the converted, because I think a lot of people will be thinking about how to bring in people in poverty into the digital world. If I can just start with where JRF is on poverty itself. So we define poverty as having resources that are well below your minimum needs, where those needs include taking part in society. And we've been tracking what the public think those needs consist of since 2008. And when we started, only families with secondary school children thought that the internet at home was part of that essential requirement. And in the most recent research we published last year, all age groups, including older people, now see that as part of the minimum standard. And I think that's quite a telling sign over such a short period of how important digital has become in society. Back in September, some of you may have seen, we published a strategy to solve poverty among all age groups in the UK. And this was based on a 5-point plan. This aimed to reduce living costs and raise incomes, develop an effective social security system, boost education and skills, strengthen families and communities, and deliver inclusive economic growth. And you can probably think already, hearing those headlines, where digital might fit in, and I would say it kind of fits in across all 5 of those. So I'll just say a little bit about where we do see that fitting in. I think it's clear the best way of increasing your income is through good quality, secure jobs and by earning more when you're in work. And as I said before in the question to the MP that was here, we know that digital is playing a massive role in universal credit. And when fully rolled out, it will be accessed online in the first instance for most claimants. And this is a massive challenge for DWP, but I do think it's one that they're ready to rise to, if not to fully meet. But the department, I think, should consider how it can transfer other benefits, including pensions, potentially onto online channels. Because, as we heard from Nick earlier, this can save money while providing better services for claimants. But the question here, though, is how the more traditional channels of support, such as call centres, face-to-face meetings, local welfare advice, will be arranged to help those who remain excluded from digital and financial services. And there must be enough funding available in a service called Universal Support delivered locally that's providing a lot of the support for this to help those vulnerable claimants falling foul of the system, getting into debt, or worse still, homelessness and destitution. Looking for and securing a job also relies on good digital access. So some research we commissioned a few years ago showed how important the internet has become to employers as well as job seekers. So many new jobs in low-wage sectors are typically advertised online, and they're only kept live until a certain number of applications have been received, and then it's closed. So the key to getting that kind of job is to respond quickly via the web, preferably within days, if not hours. But this is not generally appreciated by some of those who are looking for work, as well as people working in job centres, with the conditionality focusing more on the number of applications people make rather than the speed at which they respond to the opportunities. But as we've heard, basic skills cannot today be seen just as literacy and numeracy. The internet is essential for all age groups, according to our research about what the public think, as well as in practice. And while 5 million adults lack core literacy and numeracy, nearly 30 million lack basic digital skills. And obviously there's a huge overlap between the two. So just to sum up, that's why in our strategy we recommend setting an ambitious target to meet all basic skill needs, including digital skills, by 2030. And we estimate this will require a doubling of the current rates of participation, and priority we think should be given to people who are experiencing poverty. And we think this would start to give us the step change that we need to see.
Thanks very much.
Right, so as introduced, I'm Shahanara Begum, Shan for short as well, and I work in Tower Hamlets like the way Shan does, for an organisation called the Bromley By Bow Centre. The Bromley By Bow Centre is quite a unique organisation. We started up about 30 years ago, and all these underlying issues of poverty was already around. And the organisation came about because of a minister who came to the area, and he actually realised that there's a lot of poverty, a lot of social issues that were just not being addressed. And as a result, the Bromley By Bow Centre, the concept of the centre actually began. The centre itself is one of the first healthy living centres in the UK, so we actually have a GP practice within our organisation. We also sit within a park, so it's quite a lovely area when you actually go into the Bromley By Bow area. But I think one of the unique things about our organisation is that under the umbrella we actually have about 5 unique services. So in terms of referring, we can actually refer between all of our different departments rather than to external organisations, and obviously external organisations are there if we do need to actually refer. The type of departments that we have is community connections, which I head up, and that is very much about the ground roots of the community. We have advice and welfare, which, you know, as you can imagine, where we are is inundated with clients coming through the doors. We have health and well-being, being a healthy living centre. We also have employment and skills. And then finally, we have something called Beyond Business, which is very much about allowing local communities to set up their own business through a dragon-style approach. So that's the organisation in a nutshell. And as I said, we're in the heart of East London, so it's quite important to put the context of poverty that surrounds Tower Hamlets. So I was doing quite a lot of fact filing, and one of the facts that I came about was about the indices of deprivation 2015 to actually demonstrate how widespread poverty is in Tower Hamlets. More than 58% of the borough's lower layer super output areas, which is basically geographical areas which they define for data purposes, is in the most deprived 20% of their LSOAs in the whole of the UK, well, England. So it just shows how high poverty is, and child poverty is also a big thing in Tower Hamlets. But what we also associate in where we are is language. Language needs is another big area which actually directly has an input within poverty. So if we actually look at language needs in Tower Hamlets, we have 34% that have language other than English as their main language, and that's across 22% in London. So in Tower Hamlets, language is quite a big thing. So, and that's in reflection to what we're seeing through our doors. You know, can digital inclusion help towards eradicating poverty? And the simple answer is yes, but not as a standalone. I think with digital inclusion, what we have actually found is it has to be embedded amongst all of our services. So that's the approach that, as an organisation, we're actually taking. So we have GP practices that are around our area, who have something called the Universal Referral Form, and they actually socially prescribe digital inclusion for their patients into our services. That's one way of actually feeding digital inclusion in. We also feed digital inclusion in through our ESOL learning. So we have a scheme of work where the tutors are required to put in at least half a term's worth of digital inclusion, so that people are able to understand digital inclusion. I think when someone comes in and you offer them the computer and you offer them the service of filling up their forms, that isn't sufficient. I think we need to take a much more holistic approach of actually embedding digital inclusion as part of everyday service that we do, but also understanding the soft outcomes. A lot of people lack the confidence to actually come into the centre first, but then also the confidence of actually understanding, okay, what am I going to do? Is this the right way for me to go? But also understanding that it takes the community that we're working with, it takes them a lot just to get out the front door. So making sure that we've got outreach workers who are skilled up to actually have that skill where they are able to build that rapport with the person to make them make that move. Because like Chris has actually said, you know, universal credits, they're rolling up very, very soon, and that's actually going to put a lot of people into further poverty. And I don't think that we are actually prepared, whether it's our organisation or your organisation, for the influx of people that are going to be left behind, who then are put further into poverty again. So again, I guess our concept and our idea is embed digital inclusion throughout all of your services and make it an intervention that's very holistic, as opposed to come in and take a seat, look at the computer and out. That would not work.
Okay, thank you very much. Roger.
My name is Roger Hamilton. I work at St. Mungo's homeless charity. The charity has been around for a number of years, and we've been through changes. But in everything that we do, it's about alleviating homelessness. And more recently, we've adopted a few contracts that are geared at preventing poverty. And we're still trying to come to grips with the whole idea of how do we go about preventing poverty amongst the homeless sector or within the homeless sector. The clients that we work with are or have been disadvantaged by society in many ways. So our task is formidable in addressing the individual and the combined issues that our client group faces. Because of the success of the work that we've been doing over the past couple of years, we've recently been working ostensibly with councils, boroughs within London, to help their social tenants to maintain their properties, to prevent evictions and those who are threatened with homelessness, to try to find a pathway to prevent them from sliding down into that abyss of poverty, as it were. My role is, I'm a work coordinator, but I started in this role or in this job as an IT tutor. And that was based on the support that I received personally in overcoming the barriers that I had when I was homeless, to actually engaging and helping to rebuild my life. So our motto is helping people rebuild their lives, and that is what we do day by day. But I think all of us here would agree that we're all doing our bit towards helping people rebuild a sustainable and independent life. But what is lacking is a clear national policy to help us address the various issues. And without that national policy, a lot of the work that we're doing will be inconsistent, it will be time-bound and restricted, largely because of funding. As a charity, although one of the largest charities, homeless charities in the UK, we struggle with the basic resources that we need to provide the services and the support for every individual that we go out on the streets and bring in and engage in our services, those who sustain the engagement to help them prepare a pathway to lead an independent life. And it's not something that is going to be overcome in a few years. It's going to take a lifetime. For a lot of our clients, they've been entrenched in homelessness for many years. There's an increase in homelessness. That's needless to say. It's not something that I think statistics can even highlight. It is evident. We see it every day. We see more and more homeless people being left disenfranchised. Our remit is to help as many as we can, the best way that we can. One of the things that we've been doing recently on a current contract that I'm working on is to make sure that socially housed tenants can actually maintain their tenancies. The additional barriers of the reduced benefit cap, universal credit, the bedroom tax, they all compound the many issues that we face every day in supporting and empowering our clients to help lift them out of poverty. There's no quick fix and there's no easy answer. And great things have come out of Good Things Foundation in the help and the support that we've been able to access from them to help a lot of our clients find that motivation, that will, that determination, and to engage with the support that's available, as limited as it is, but to engage with it to the point where they can become independent. A lot of them, like myself, are in a jam, just about managing. And even though we're working every day, 40 hours even a week, 60 hours for some, they have to, they don't have a choice. We still get stuck in that rut of still being in poverty. Again, it comes back to the whole lack of a clear national policy on alleviating poverty. And until that is addressed, all the work, all the good work that we're doing here will come to naught until we have a sustained and consistent policy to help us, help not just our clients, but the entire nation to address this issue of poverty that we're currently living in.
Thank you very much.
Well, apologies for being late. Perhaps I need my own digital literacy test, if anyone has one. I'm from Working Links, so we're a company that specialise in supporting people back into work, and we've been doing that for 16 years since the government started outsourcing these programmes. So we've worked across all of them. Primary ones at the moment are Work Programme and Work Choice, and shortly to be changed over to the Work and Health Programme. So the people that come to us come in two main ways. They've either been unemployed for quite some time and been referred on by Job Centre Plus, so that's at least a year, but could be much longer. Or they're people on disability benefits. There's an illness or a disability, but they have opted in. They want support to try and get into employment, and employment as a route to get out of poverty. I think it's fair to say, because they're on benefits, we're not looking at a wealthy group at all, quite the opposite. And when people come to us, we're looking at holistically what are their circumstances. We need to know what the situation is, what else is on their mind. Many of the things that have been touched on by the panel already. If somebody is worried about falling into homelessness, they haven't really got the mental capacity to start thinking about where they might work and what they might do. So we look at all those factors and work with a whole variety of organisations, and some of them may well be in the room, where we can give more specialist advice or more support can be given to that individual. We also look at their strengths as well. And part of that is obviously assessing what's their ICT skills. Now, we don't examine it, we don't test them, but we do ask them. And by looking at our own data, we can see that obviously, it's no surprise, it makes a big difference about how successful we will be and they will be at managing to find employment while they're with us. So given all the other factors, health, housing, instability, we still find that it makes about a third difference between the people who say that they have good or great ICT skills compared to those who say they are poor or have low skills. So it's a profound difference, and it's not really surprising. The panel has already touched on the fact that employers want these skills. And they want these skills for the kind of jobs that might surprise us. I was talking to a woman who we placed into a sort of low sort of end supermarket, and she was fine, but they didn't keep her because her ICT skills were too low for that role. Now she's now doing something else, she worked on improving them. However, it just shows the breadth of what people need to do. And on that journey towards getting into employment, we support them to get skills, but we need to think about how do people find work now? Because we need to turn ourselves almost into a product. We need to be an online product to be as successful as we could be at finding where the work is and what skills we might need to develop to get that work. We have our online CVs, we search online for whatever jobs. We have to think about what keywords we could put in how we sell ourselves that mean that we are found more easily by employers. And that takes a certain level of confidence and sophistication. And it can be supported by better technology around how to match people's skills outside of their own potential imagination about what they could do. So that's a potential benefit, and I think there are steps at the universal job match within DWP. They're looking at how they could do that better. But it still means people need to have those skills. Now, within that as well, there's lots of stuff that we can do and courses that people can go on, and that's definitely a benefit. It can be less expensive to retrain. So again, just a little example of a man who had been a driver for 30 years. That was no longer a career option for him. However, he had rather given up. He couldn't think about what he could do, but through discussion, we learned that he was passionate about fitness. And we were able to help him fund his way through accredited programs online to become a fitness instructor. And that included nutrition, but it also included how do you manage your tax returns, all sorts of complicated stuff that is, through digital by default, increasingly becoming online. And it leads me to think about the other kind of job entry, the low-skilled jobs, and how much they're changing over the recent years. I think we'll probably all be quite aware of Uber and perhaps of Deliveroo. These are jobs where people are essentially working through technology to do whatever they need to do, but they're not employed. I know there are court cases going on about that, and they need to manage their own accounts, and potentially through that technology they are earning less than the minimum wage because they are self-employed, and there's less rules around that, so less support. And it leads me to think about the wider context of the change that we're going to see. Now, there are predictions about how much machine learning and automation might affect the job market, and some of them may be more dramatic than others, but there's no doubt it will happen. I'm told that within a couple of years we will have tens of thousands of drones flying above us, delivering whatever wants to be delivered. Now, it could be a pizza, but it could be a piece of emergency medical equipment to somebody having a heart attack and cutting through the traffic. So, it could be fantastic. But I'm just thinking that for each of those drones in the past, it would have been a person taking whatever it is and delivering it off. So that's one example, but within all our own jobs, we need to think about how they're changing and how the technology affects us. So at Working Links, we see people when they've already been out of the workplace for a while or possibly have never worked. But actually, in the changing nature of the job, we know that a job for life is probably a very, very fortunate thing and rare now. But even the idea of a linear job progression is becoming more specialised, more lucky. I think most of us are now more in a kind of latest system, a matrix system, where we pick up skills, then we have to either retrain, thank you employer, or by our own initiative, or we move to another job. But no matter what, our jobs are changing in terms of how we relate to technology, and we need to keep pace with that. Now, from the people that we see, we know that actually if somebody's worked with recently, relatively recently, within a year, we're 4 times more likely to get them a job than if they haven't worked for several years. So getting to people quickly and at the right time is really important. It lets me think about what are we doing within our employment situation, what are we doing within education to help people become more resilient to learning how they will adapt through the technology changes that we're seeing today. And I think that is where we need a policy that spans across the government departments to make sure that we caretaker people through the quite profound changes that are happening.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, who's going to kick us off with a question? A huge amount of expertise on the panel, but also when it comes to this, right, you're just doing this to wind me up, aren't you, quite frankly? I'll do my very best here. I'll try and channel my dad's wonderful, and I'm going to have a go. I am going to have a go, you know. We all know, right. Yeah. Oh, it's improving.
That wasn't me. Hi, I'm Gemma from Cornwall Royal Community Charity. Very interested to hear what Shah was saying about how it's about what other services you're providing and how does it all link together. We do the same thing. Our digital inclusion team actually sits in our health and wellbeing team, who also does energy advice, which also does locking into sort of mental health services, carer support worker services. And that's what we found. There's never one cause, is there? That's the point with poverty. It's got many tentacles. And you're saying about national policies, joined up thinking. And that's really, you know, that's what the conversation has to go to for me next, is how do we integrate all the different factors that contribute to poverty and then tackle them together. So my question is to the panel is, how do we, it's not just digital inclusion, social inclusion is so much more. So what are you doing, or what ideas do you have to sort of really start integrating these things together to make that difference?
Yeah, so how do we pull all these different bits of the jigsaw together, really?
Well, I guess from my perspective is, you know, I think integration is a huge thing for us, especially where we are based in the heart of the East End. We've got such a vibrant community, but we've also got people that are not integrating as much as they should do. And that also crosses over with the whole digital inclusion theme. And one of the things that we have actually found was going back to very much the grassroots of delivery. So we're talking about things like what interests people to actually have that as a little thing to actually pull them into the centre. And I think that pull, a lot of people can't get that pulled right, and as a result we're losing out a lot of people. So for example, you know, there's a lot of carers out there. There's some carers that have been caring for their loved ones for such a long time, and then they're faced with the reality where they have to actually see their the person that they're caring for off to another organisation, and now they're facing a situation where they haven't got the skills, for starters, to actually come out because they've been in the home looking after this individual for such a long time. And then for them, what is the motivation, what is the pull to actually get them back in? So for us, we've actually gone through Time Bank, and Time Bank is very much a skills set exchange to actually tell people and give them some value and say, yes, you can actually offer lots to the community. Yes, we know that you've been caring for that particular person, but the skill sets that actually come with that is massive, which other organisations can actually benefit. And then getting them into the community and building, like I say, in such a holistic way, the soft outcomes is so important for us. Building and using that as a stepping stone will surely get people back into the community and get them engaging, integrating, and hence the whole digital inclusion, you feed that in straight after. And that's, I think, at the moment for us, is working really well.
Okay. Did you want to come in on that as well? And then we'll take another question.
So I think it's a lovely question. And for me, there's kind of two centres of gravity. So there's a centre of gravity, which is the organisation in which we each work. And so, you know, you might be delivering services, you might be designing products, you might be campaigning, whatever it is. But every organisation needs to look internally and challenge ourselves and ask ourselves the question, in which ways are we contributing to poverty? In which ways are we helping alleviate poverty? And I guarantee that there's not a single charity, advice agency, whatever, business, who couldn't do something better themselves. We're really quick to point the finger and say, it's if only someone else changed. But we absolutely know that the only people you can change are yourselves. So I always begin with, turn the gaze in first. So look at ourselves as an organisation. We've developed that to the level where we help organisations by going in and helping and ask them really think through. An example from Toynbee Hall. When I first arrived in 2009, we talked with pride about the queues around the door and around the corner for our debt advice. Now we would be ashamed that someone was queuing for debt advice because it would mean we hadn't set up the service properly. But back then, when telephones weren't really kind of working and we didn't have enough people, we certainly didn't have much kind of digital tools to help people, we thought that having the queue around the corner showed that our advice was wanted. So turn in and ask, what can you do differently? And then secondly, no bit of the poverty journey is as an isolated issue, as you've said. And so turn the gaze outwards and look at the whole journey. Why has someone's life gone from here to here? What were all the many, many steps? And don't just try and solve the last bit of the problem. Think about what is it in the locality or in the sector or in the environment generally, and by that I mean the world that we humans have designed for ourselves, not just the kind of physical, natural earth environment. What have we done to build a system where the environment shapes a pathway this way rather than that way? And I always use the room I'm in to illustrate this. This stage, the only sensible way to get up on this stage is here or right over there, which absolutely narrows the route into the stage, which means that if you all had to get onto this stage, you'd all have to queue, or some of you'd have to take a really big leap. So when we think about products and services, whatever that is, whether it's advice or financial products and services or healthcare, if we don't really take a step back and look at the whole route, and we just often, as a community, jump to a conclusion, people are doing stupid things, it's their fault they somehow got there. No, most people are in the seat they're in because that's how the environment shaped it for them to end up there. So we take a step back and we look at the entire pathway and the entire environment and we work together. And wherever you see, wherever I see, wherever each of us sees a thing that could be changed, speak up. Don't just keep that idea to yourself. I guarantee people won't have spotted it. Be a voice. Start campaigning in your own little group. Get online, use digital tools to say, have you noticed this? Have you noticed that? That's how change happens.
Can I just say something before I give up my chance for an iPad?
Yeah.
So I totally agree with the question, and we spent 4 years and £2.5 million and a lot of time and effort and engagement coming up with our strategy to solve poverty. And it is a very developed and complicated problem that cuts across all government departments. But the key thing is that digital as an enabler and as a route out of poverty is kind of there throughout the whole structure. And there are lots of other things too, but I think it does play a key part. And I'd just say, sorry I've got to go, but if anyone wants to ask me any questions about our strategy or about poverty and JRS work on digital, then do drop me a line via the website.
Yeah. Or, who are you on Twitter?
Chris_Goulden.
Okay.
Goulden with a U.
Okay, just repeat that again so people know.
Chris_Goulden. Excellent.
And if you use our hashtag, it means that everyone can follow the conversation.
Yep.
Okay, go rescue your children. I'll allow you to do that. And we've got time for perhaps one more question, because I'd much rather the questions came from you. I've got lots of questions here. Right the way over here.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I've given it this.
Oh, have you got a question?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take your
Sorry.
question then. Yeah, let's go for the...
How do you empower those in poverty who are actually comfy and happy in their low-income lifestyle?
Yeah, so there's probably like two things there, really. Who wants to pick up on this?
Yeah.
Roger?
When I started working as an IT volunteer at St. Mungo's, I think one of the first things that struck me about the ability to have an effect on somebody else's life was the relationship that I was able, or relationships that I was able to build with every other client that came in that room. And because I related to them as an individual and with respect, wanted to know their story, I think I had to share some of my story. So the whole concept of each one help one, peer support, is very valid. Without that community building spirit, we're lost. We will be lost forever. Good Things Foundation has helped to support that community building spirit. So it's about each person, as one of my co-panelists mentioned, each person looking within themselves to see what else can they do. How can they empower someone else who seems to be lost or is losing their way? How can we help them to get back on track? What support can we offer them to help them to become included in what is available in society and lessen the detriment or the detrimental effects of exclusion? Digital is playing a brilliant part in it, but we're not going to rest on our laurels. We still have a far way to go. Even within our organization, we struggle with the digital technology that we have access to. So we can imagine how our clients are struggling with theirs and their inability to access what's available. But it's about that support, that one-to-one support. I think that is the way forward for us. Until we start to rebuild that community spirit, again, we're going to be very isolated in our thinking, isolated in our approach to solving problems. Until we combine our efforts and share our efforts and share our success stories, our good news stories, then we won't realize the potential impact that we can have to rebuild communities and to alleviate the effects of poverty.
Great question. I'm sure lots of people in the audience have got thoughts on that, so please use the hashtag and then feedback, because unfortunately I need to wrap this panel up just so that we get through all of the presentations that we've got lined up for you. So can we hear it for a brilliant panel? And I'll invite all of you to make your way off either that way or that way, because they are the safest two ways of leaving the stage. Thank you very much.